Hello, welcome to Cardboard History. I'm David. Today I want to do another episode of my Ken Burns collection and show a card that I recently picked up and tell the story of the player on the card. Now I'm moving along in this collection. For those of you who maybe haven't seen any of these videos yet, the project I'm working on is to collect a card from every person who is mentioned in the Ken Burns documentary Baseball. And those are right now I'm working on just those who are mentioned both in the documentary video series as well as the accompanying book that went along with it. That kind of narrows down my collection. So today I want to share a card that I picked up. This is card number 56 out of 462. So moving along, over 10% of the way there now. And this card is of George Sisler. So first I want to share a little bit of his story, and then about halfway through the story I'll show the card that I picked up. So Sisler is widely considered one of the best hitters in the history of baseball. He, along with Cobb, are the only players to have multiple seasons batting over 400. And who knows, if not for injury, what more records he may have broken. He was a three-sport standout athlete in high school. He grew up just south of Cleveland, and his parents were both college educated, so their family had a high emphasis on education. And he moved to Akron to go to high school and lived with his brother because there was not a high school in his hometown. And it was there in high school that he stood out both as a basketball, football, and baseball player. At the end of high school, he could have chosen to go pro, but instead followed his parents' desire for him to go get a college education, and he went to the University of Michigan. Originally, he didn't plan on pursuing any athletics while at Michigan. He was originally enrolled in the law school, but switched over to engineering because he had more of a mind for math. And it was shortly after he got to Michigan that Michigan filled their vacant baseball coach position by a man of the name Branch Rickey. So, sort of fortuitous coincidence, these two men coming together at the University of Michigan at the same time. And that winter, Sisler, as a freshman, tried out for the baseball team. And tryouts were only open to upperclassmen, but Sisler had really developed quite a reputation from playing for the engineering department in intramural competition, and he really impressed in the tryouts and was able to make the team. During the off season, he would go and play back at home in Akron on different company teams and things like that. He's most known as being a hitter, but he started out as both a pretty dominant pitcher and a hitter. During the summer after his freshman year, while pitching for an Akron company team, he threw a no-hitter, and the umpire who called that no-hitter was none other than Cy Young. So sort of a meeting there of the old generation and the new generation of baseball. However, Sisler did begin to experience some arm discomfort, and that really limited his ability to pitch. He pitched off and on throughout college. His sophomore year, he batted .445 and was named All-American. After that season, Branch Rickey left and went and joined the front office of the St. Louis Browns. And so he stayed in college one more year, and his junior year of college batted .451 and had really a fantastic career. Once again, was All-American and was pitching, but during these college years really began to develop some arm discomfort and pain that limited his ability to pitch. Following his junior year, there was a little bit of a dispute over his services. It was discovered that right after his senior year of high school, when he was 17 years old, he had signed a contract to play for the Akron Champs. This contract was then later purchased by Columbus, and the Pittsburgh Pirates, hearing of Sisler's skill and ability, sort of under the radar went and purchased the contract from Columbus. So his services were somewhat tied to Pittsburgh, but Branch Rickey, really wanting him to come and play for the Browns, found a little bit of a loophole. When Sisler signed this document, the contract, he was only 17, and he didn't have a legal guardian. His father didn't sign the document, so therefore it was not legally binding. And the whole case went before arbitration to argue whether or not Sisler would be able to enter the majors as a free agent or whether his services were already tied to the Pirates. And the National Commission eventually ruled that he could enter as a free agent and that the contract was not binding. This allowed Branch Rickey to put in a bid to get the free agent, and Sisler went to the St. Louis Browns, where he spent most of his career. His rookie year, he pitched. He had 6 complete games and a 2.83 ERA. Appeared in a total of 15 games, 70 innings. So not a bad rookie campaign. One of the highlights of that year pitching was that he managed to beat Walter Johnson in a game against Washington. He also was acclimating to batting and had a sub 300 batting average his rookie year, but that would be the last time that his batting average would fall below 300 for many years. The next year, he really got acclimated to the league and began to Rickey transitioned him over to first base, where he is most known for playing. He excelled wherever he went. If he was in the outfield, he was one of the best outfielders. If he was on first base, one of the best first basemen. If his arm was healthy enough to pitch, he was a dominant pitcher. So that second season, he hit .305, and it was the first of 9 consecutive seasons hitting over 300. His most dominant season came in 1922 when he hit .420, which is one of the highest batting averages of all time, and also set the American League record with a 41-game hitting streak, the record that would later be broken by DiMaggio in 1941. And his accomplishments in that 1922 series are highlighted on this card, so I want to show this card now. And this is the 1925 Turf Cigarettes, and this is a multi-sport series from Europe. And it features Sisler, and it's kind of one of the rare cards from Europe that features an American. And there's a few anomalies on the back. So this is card 50 in the second series. And the first thing is it puts him as C.H. Sisler instead of G.H. Sisler. And notes that he put up the highest batting average known in the history of the American League, which is not true. Lajoie's was higher. And also, interestingly here, it notes that he hit for 41,979. So that's a European designation of how they would do batting average. His batting average was a 419 or .41979 is how you'd see it here. So I thought that was a little bit weird that it had 41,000 as the batting average. It also mentions, curiously, that his name's going to be inscribed on a $100,000 baseball monument, which will be erected in Washington. And if you've ever been to Washington, D.C. and seen this monument, well, you haven't. It doesn't exist. There was plans to build this monument, and it was believed to be a testament to the MVP winners. And that's kind of how the story goes, whether or not it was in kind of conglomeration with expanding Washington's Griffith Stadium. But there was going to be some sort of a monument that was going to highlight the best players in the American League. And because Sisler had won the MVP, his name would be etched on there. And I guess the plan was that it would show each MVP winner, and each player that had won the MVP would have their name etched on it. There was some argument back and forth with Cooperstown, as Cooperstown was at this point trying to establish themselves as the Baseball Hall of Fame and to center kind of the history of the game in Cooperstown. And they wanted the monument to be located there. The monument was never actually constructed, and a few years later, the Hall of Fame was opened in Cooperstown, and Sisler himself would join. But those are just some interesting things on the back of this. I have to credit kind of being Europe, and Europe not being as familiar with the game of baseball as to some of the facts on here that are not true. But overall, I like this card because it looks like it shows kind of an in-action shot of them actually playing, which is a little bit more rare for cigarette cards, tobacco cards of the era. And even though you can't really quite make out that that is specifically Sisler, he was known as batting very flat-footed, which he appears to be in this image. He's often compared with Ty Cobb, as they both had the ability to hit the ball wherever they wanted. But Cobb's batting stance, he would move his feet around and shift his feet to get the ball where he wanted to go. And Sisler would just stand very flat-footed almost, and use his impressive hand-eye coordination to get the ball where he wanted it to go. So that is the 1925 Turf cigarettes of George Sisler. Now, after that 1922 season, Sisler had a medical condition. He had a severe sinus infection that caused him to miss the entire 1923 season, and it was so severe that it ultimately resulted in him dealing with some significant migraines and some double vision. And so he did come back for the 1924 season, but his batting average was down, more closer to the league average, still above 300. And from there, he was still a great hitter, but never quite as dominant as he was in that 1922 season. The Browns would have him step in and be the manager, a role which he later claimed he was not quite ready for. And he would have maybe rather stepped into that role when he was a little bit older and had more experience, but still being pretty young. He managed for 3 years, and then eventually he was shipped off to Washington in 1928, where he was there for just a brief while before they sent him to the Boston Braves. And he finished out his career with the Boston Braves, batting 2 seasons over 300 again, and then retired. After retired, he continued to be involved in baseball. He was elected to the Hall of Fame in 1939, along the likes of A.G. Spalding, Cap Anson was in that class. Lou Gehrig was also in that class. So some pretty prominent names that he was inducted alongside of in that 4th Hall of Fame class. In 1942, he joined the Brooklyn Dodgers. So at that point, Branch Rickey was with the Dodgers, and Branch brought him in as a scout, and also sort of a talent development type of role. And in that position, he helped scout and also prepare Jackie Robinson to join the majors. When Jackie joined the majors, he transitioned to first base, much like Sisler did. Jackie wasn't coming from being a pitcher, but still he had to learn the skills, and Sisler was the one that helped him make that transition. And then later in 1951, when Branch Rickey transitioned to and moved to the Pittsburgh Pirates, Sisler went with him and helped develop some more players over there, along the likes of Mazeroski, Clemente, and I had one other name, Willie Stargell, were some of the other players that he helped them hone their skills, specifically batting. He passed away just 2 days after his 80th birthday in 1973, and he actually has 2 sons that played in the major leagues. One of them is Dave Sisler, and this is his picture from the 62 top set. And his other son that played was Dick Sisler. And I couldn't find a card of him, but his legacy passed on to that next generation. So that's the story of George Sisler and his time in baseball. I hope you enjoyed this. It was really fun for me to get to learn a little bit more about this player who is not always mentioned along the likes of Ruth and Cobb and Wagner, but was nevertheless one of the most dominant players during his time. Thank you for watching Cardboard History.